Welcome to the Michigan Football at the Voice of College Football channel. I am one of your post-game hosts, Desmond. I have got Mark Rogers with us and also my post-game partner, Dre, with us as well. Thank you so much for joining us. While you are here, hit the like and subscribe button. We definitely appreciate it. Also share the video out on social media so we can spread the word and try to grow our channel. Also, visit Mark's main channel, The Voice of College Football. The information should be in the description link below. And there are also ways to contribute to the channel. And last but not least, you can see our tickers scrolling down at the bottom with Mark's Patreon, where he has his weekly picks from himself, but also other media members as well. So, gentlemen, how are we doing today? Dre, how you doing, man?
Good overall. Uh, was it feeling under the weather a little bit? Ironically, during the game, was still feeling a little bit under the weather, but starting to feel a bit better. But unfortunately, now the wife is, got whatever I got, and no, we don't think it's what we think it, what's going around, but it's definitely something. And but overall, we're doing fine.
So we could directly point to the Michigan game was your fault. You were not 100%.
Was
So this
not
was your fault.
100% ready to go. Wasn't ready to go. I gave it my best shot. I gave the team all I had, but it's not enough.
Okay, perfect. Well, hopefully the missus recovers quickly and is healthy. Mark, how you doing?
I'm good. I'm good. We are at the end of bowl season now, so we just have one game to play. And not that it was the most difficult prediction I've ever, made in my life, but I will brag that for the second consecutive year, the previous summer, I forecasted the national championship game.
Really? That's impressive. Especially with I think we can all agree that that people would definitely have picked Georgia and Alabama preseason to be two of the better teams, but I think it's difficult to call two teams in the same conference in the national championship. So that's pretty impressive.
And I went Ohio State Notre Dame as the other two participants, and they were close at 5 and 6. Not quite there. Not quite Michigan.
No, not quite the Wolverines, but and I give you full credit, Mark. Let's be honest. I mean, on most years, you can go at least 50% by just penciling Bama in your prediction. Just go ahead and write Bama right there. Most likely, you're gonna get at least 50%.
That's why I said that with a smirk. I said, come on, Bama's almost automatic, and then there's been 5 other teams that have been pretty much the playoff, and that's been that. So you're going to get pretty close by selecting somebody in there.
Yeah, that's my guess is most people probably would have penciled Clemson in there as well. So that's interesting that they, not an awful season, but not a great season by their standards. So that's it's interesting you did not have them there. So
Well, they let me to lose Trevor Lawrence. I mean, I think that was I can understand what Mark was thinking there. I mean, what are the odds of losing a guy like that who's for their program generational? And being able to bounce back right away. But you could have at least leaned on DJ. See, I thought that DJ was going to be a little bit better. And I thought based on the brief games he played due to Trevor Lawrence getting COVID or going COVID protocol in the 2020 season, that was indicative that, they could stay afloat, especially with a weak ACC. They should at least make the playoffs. Mm-hmm. So, I am shocked he didn't go with Clemson. Cause I think that I had them in my top 4, because I thought that would play out. But whatever.
Yeah, ACC's, it's been extremely top heavy. Let's just put it that way. Which really, when you look at most of the Power 5 conferences, they're most of them are pretty top heavy. I think the Big Ten's probably done the best job of having multiple teams playing at a really high level, but. Yeah, Clemson's had a rough year by Clemson standards.
Real quick, hey Ed Rogers, didn't Ohio State get blanked 24-0 versus Clemson back in 2016?
31 zip.
31 zip. So can we not do this right now? Let's do this. I know we're gonna get trolls here, but just stop. Just stop. Don't clearly you got your Buckeye glasses on. It's fine. Thanks for watching, but let's not do this. Keep going, guys. I'm sorry.
Perfect. So we are 6 days removed from the Michigan Georgia game. Georgia won that game 34-11, and really a topic that Mark wanted to cover was that game indicative of both of those teams? So was that, Georgia, let's just call it what it was, a dominant win over Michigan? Was that indicative of who those two teams really are and were this football season? Dre, I'll kick it to you first.
I'm going to go. It's half right to say that that's indicative of both those teams. I think it was an indicative of a Georgia team. I'm not saying Georgia played their best football, but I think that was a lot more indicative of the Georgia team we saw all year, besides the SEC championship. On the opposite side, I thought that Michigan played uh, uh, did uncharacteristically based on how they have the whole season. And I'm not saying that the result would have been different. Let me be very clear. I'm not saying that result would have been different. I still believe, all in all, even with Michigan playing the best and Georgia playing the same game, Georgia still wins. But I thought with the self-inflicted mistakes, like dropping passes, losing your guy in coverage, false starts, fumbles, interceptions, all the self-inflicted mistakes that Michigan had, the turnovers, the lack of being in the right fits with the rush defense, and you're not able to get home with your pass rush, which has been your strength all season. Yeah, I thought Michigan hurt themselves a lot, and I thought that played a huge part in why the game got out of hand so quickly. So I will say that statement is half right.
And the reason I asked that is because we're coming up on a rematch, and a lot of people just automatically jump to, well, Alabama beat them a month ago. The two teams played. They're the better team. They killed them. They're gonna beat them again. And that would seem to make, if you didn't watch sports and didn't live around sports, that would seem to make sense. All the same guys are going to be on the field, same coaching staffs, same situation. Why would it not be the exact same thing? But we should know better from sports. And I'm actually going to probably post a video, if I really want to dive into it this deep, to go through rematches throughout history and try to track and try to come up with some kind of trend line for how that's played out, because we know we see it all the time in the NFL.
Mm-hmm.
Teams play twice in their division, obviously, and then meet several times in the playoffs. That's common, playing conference championship games, and we see all sorts of results go all over the place. Dre, I know you're a baseball fan, but toss baseball out of it. The pitcher is so paramount in any series that those two teams are pretty much a different team every night. But take the NBA. It amazes me that they could be playing, if they play a 2-3-2 series, that they could be playing in the same venue 2 nights in a row, same players, same coach, same everything. And it's not even that, in comparison to football, strategic of a sport, that much should change, you would think. And the Lakers can win one night by 18, and the next night the Cavs win by 12. They could be completely different games back-to-back nights with all the same personnel on the floor.
Yeah, I think what makes there's a bigger what can impact both sports differently, that you can see that difference. I can't talk like I want to, but anyway, it's momentum shifts. In the NBA and basketball, you have runs. Teams have a lot of runs, right? And sometimes on one game, one team may have a longer run than the other team, and then that's why it's a close game. Or it could be a team like the Warriors who are hitting threes all over the place, and all of a sudden you're down 15, and the last game was a close game, right? So I think, in football, it's just tougher to have those kind of runs. You don't really see teams going on 21-0 runs in football very often when it's a really good matchup. If it's Alabama playing Mercer University, yeah, you may see Alabama go on a 28-0 run, right? But in football, you really don't see that. So that's why I think it's rare that you do see like those huge differences game to game. And then also one thing that's going to be huge is that both teams have are just solely focused on each other, and this is it. And I think it's tougher to beat. I would love to see what you do when you do your deep dive, Mark, but it's tougher to beat a team back to back like that in a season.
Yeah, you mentioned how rare it is in football to go on a run. And with that, I think about the Georgia Alabama game where I think Alabama scored 24 points in the second half. And I think I think the final score was a 17-point spread. So you remove a, uncommon run like that, and you've got a much closer football game. Now, it kind of is what it is, right? The game is what happened, but nonetheless, I'd imagine it's had to be extremely difficult to play another team to play the same team within even just the same season. I mean, we look at Notre Dame and Clemson last year, and granted, there were more factors into that game than just playing each other. But I would imagine in college, especially in college football, I'd imagine that it doesn't go. I doubt there's unless there's a huge gap. I doubt that it's usually a sweep for one team or the other.
But also, I'm sorry I was about to say something there, Mark, but like also, I think the situation is different too because going into the SEC title game, you had a desperate Bama team that needed to win, right? And a Georgia team that, quite frankly, I'm not saying they went in there and laid down, but quite frankly, didn't need to win the game. That was a gotta have it game for Alabama, in which I actually think it's more reverse this time. Look, both teams want to win a national title game, but I believe it's Georgia based on how their season is gone and how they were embarrassed versus Bama. That I think has more on the line. They're like, we're not. We got our second chance, and we're not going to lose this game. I think it's different. I could definitely say it's different for Bama. Bama's not in a gotta have it game, if that makes sense, right? I just think the emotions going into this game will be different, and therefore you probably will see a different result. Maybe not in terms of the win or loss, but definitely how the game plays out.
So to spin this in the Michigan direction, the reason I brought that up was obviously we had the game that we had. It was not competitive. Right. But the way I evaluate teams, I want to know as close to whatever the truth is as possible to measure all those things. But this is all we've got. But then we can always make connections to say, well, these other things have happened for these two teams throughout the season. So therefore, when Rutgers shows up, if they were showing up to play Michigan or to play Georgia and we got a certain result, it would be like, okay, it was 52-10. Okay, that's what everybody expected. And then all these other results that the two teams play add up to make sense out of that result. This one, maybe they do, maybe they don't. Maybe the SEC at the top is that much better than the Big Ten champion. That is certainly a number of factors would point to that being just what it is, that the Big Ten's a really good conference, but it's more like there's 5 really good teams, but the 2 best teams in the country by far are over in the SEC, and that's all there is to it, and that's the end of the explanation. And some talent ratings in recruiting would point to that to a certain extent, but not totally, not to that extent when Georgia's beating Kentucky and Auburn and those teams that you would not think are as good as Michigan. And I think it's reasonable, even for the most ardent SEC fan, not to be able to win that argument because obviously we saw the Michigan-Ohio State game. And even with Ohio State not necessarily being the best team that it's been this year, it's one of the 4 best teams and probably the 3 most talented teams in the country. So Michigan was able to do that and repeat that effort against other good teams. So I watched, I was on Michigan podcast yesterday. So I never know what Steve Dace is going to toss me. So I thought I better rewatch the first half because I wanted to really go through every play and watch every play and think, okay, was that a play that was won by Georgia because they out-schemed Michigan? They fooled them? or they were just better. That athlete was better than that athlete. And I think I came to that conclusion most of the time about the athleticism, but there were certainly things that Michigan did that didn't make a whole lot of sense, or Georgia out-schemed them a few times, I thought. But those Michigan players are going to be playing in the NFL. Georgia's going to have a larger amount of players, most likely, on this roster, on this team, that play in the NFL. But it's not going to be a huge disparity.
No. Well, and that is
How many big people though? And Des, I'd love for you to hit on that.
How many big people? Like linemen? Are you talking about, or are we talking personalities?
Yeah, how many linemen? I think that's where it really is different. You have to really get into it. How many? I think what makes the biggest discrepancy and difference in terms of guys who are NFL talent and how it's currently translating to college game and based on the results is line play and skill positions on the outside, right? Like you can really see the difference, right? If Michigan's, as for example, they're good at sitting. No, bad example. Iowa's good at sending tight ends to the NFL, right? Tight end U, right? But that's like in the Michigan Iowa game in the Big Ten championship. That's the only position out of those two teams. Maybe outside of corner. Iowa does a good job at corner too recently. That Iowa's going to send probably better talent, NFL ready talent to NFL compared to Michigan. And Michigan, what I'm trying to say. So, and Michigan still wins that position overall guys going to NFL, but you'll have those George Kittles. It's a better player than any guy that Michigan has sent to NFL in the last 10 years, right? But overall, Michigan is sending more guys there. That makes sense.
Absolutely. And you bring up Iowa and Kentucky played in a bowl game. And while a lot of bowl games could be discarded as exhibitions, I watched the game. Those players were fighting. They were playing hard. That was a real bowl game. Kentucky's the third best team in the SEC, the fourth best team they're in that 3 to 5 range. Iowa's in the 3 to 5 range. This is an even matchup between the conferences, and they played down to the wire. Tennessee and Purdue, again, they are like seeded teams in both conferences. 7th best team in each conference, something in that range. They played a freaking great game. That might have been the best bowl game of the. They played hard. Purdue had a ton of opt-outs. Their two best players, David Bell is a great wide receiver. Yep. He opted out. Their defensive end, he's an All-American. George Karlaftis. He opted out. They had their number 2 wide receiver opt out of that game, and their secondary was a mess with opt-outs and injuries, and they won the game despite the controversial finish. That aside, you came away from that thinking, who's the better team? I have no idea. They were within one play, so it didn't really matter from an evaluation standpoint. So those two results were they made sense. This is I get it that Georgia's that good, but I'm just thinking, wow, if they played 10 times, 100 times, I think, I made a prediction. My prediction made absolutely no sense. And I even said it while I made it because I said, if I check off the boxes, I'm checking off Georgia in most of the boxes. And I think they win this game 65 to 70% of the time. But I just think it's going to be Michigan's night. And people don't quite get sometimes when I make a pick and say one team's better. But if they're going to win 70% of the time, that does mean that the other team could win 30% of the time. So this could be one of the 30% of the time because they only play once. So I'm taking my shot, and I picked Michigan to win. I was dead wrong.
So was I. And I don't know if how old our viewers are, but if you guys have seen the movie Little Giants, but that was that was it. One time. My cousin Randy, we raced down, the big hill in Cherry Hill.
Brother Randy.
But it was I picked Michigan as well. And I think what we ended up seeing was a little bit. I'm a big believer that it's never just one thing in a football game. And I think that what we ended up seeing was, number one, Kirby Smart, who is, I think defensively is second to none. As far as coaching goes, I'd put probably Nick Saban above him, so maybe second to one, but
Of course you do.
is just phenomenal as far as his game planning, and he did that under Nick Saban for years and years, running his defense. But having that amount of time to game plan for an opponent and doing it in a way that's just super effective, and then also you bring in, you know, the talent of the 5 stars and things like that, which I like I said, I don't think it's ever one thing. So I don't think the team that has the most 5 stars is always going to beat the team that has the least amount in the matchup. But I think that's what I think that's what it was. And a friend of mine, Corey, who watches the show, but he had mentioned he felt like Michigan, it looked like they were in a game that they hadn't been in before, like kind of not a deer in the headlights. He wasn't that extreme with it, but just we're new here, you know, in that aspect. And I think that is understandable, because I even, you know, did a quick live stream before the game just saying that this is new territory. You know, Michigan's played in really big games, and I think up until that point they had played in, if not the most watched game in the Michigan-Ohio State game of the season, it was like top 3. So it's not as if they haven't played in any bright light games, but these lights are brighter than any other. And not that it shell shocked them or anything, but I just think it comes down to, you know, being a little tight, you know, making mistakes, doing things that you typically wouldn't, or maybe the noise is more than you thought it would be. So you have a tougher time communicating. You know, with like Dre, you mentioned the corner who lost his man in coverage down the field. You know, when it's really loud, you don't hear the sideline screaming ball, ball. You know, you don't hear those things. So, you know, it's just to wrap it up. I just think it's usually more than one thing, and I think those are probably the things that contributed to things looking the way that they did on 6 days ago.
Yeah, I think, you know, what I saw was a team that was shell shocked, but not necessarily by the moment, but by the opponent. You know, like I think Michigan has to play the team that physically imposing all season. And I thought by the time it just the game got out of hand. So sometimes that happens, right? I think Mark's right. If you play that game 10 more times, no, I think there's a couple of times in those attempts Michigan may pull the game out. Definitely the game would be a lot more competitive in terms of the final score. But I think what happened was that team was a little shell shocked at how athletic Georgia was, because they were clearly a step ahead of anyone they ever played. I mean, Ohio State, even as fast as they are, physically, I thought that was their biggest weakness this year. The physicality really wasn't there for that team this year. So, you know, you really can't count Ohio State being a true test in terms of physicality. Neither were Michigan State and Penn State, right? You know, they were decent teams. So I thought this was the first time on the field that Michigan, these guys, our guys, when it gets the guys across from them, they're like, whoa, you know, our offensive linemen were used to mauling people, right? That didn't work with Jordan Davis and those guys at the middle, and the Kobe Dean shooting through the line of scrimmage and blowing up everything, right? That, you know, it's different. It's different, and I think our guys just weren't quite ready for that. The problem is, Desmond, in terms of Michigan going forward, is that you can you can get better at not being shell shocked by the moment because you've already been there. Because now you have experience. But how do you really make up for lack of athleticism, right? You know, besides just recruiting better. I mean, that's where I hope the issue is more what you say it is compared to what I say it is. Because if it's more what I think what happened, I don't know if Michigan would ever be able to close that gap.
Yeah, I mean, when you're the least athletic, you have to be flawless, which is almost impossible to ask a football team to do, right? To say no one hold, no one false start, no one, you know, no one ever miss an assignment. It's impossible. It'll never happen. So that's the difficult part, when the athleticism on the other side is either at your level or better, and then also you're not playing at it, you're not executing at a high level. I think we've talked about it earlier in the season too, when Dre, you and I had our complaints about Michigan throwing the ball. was that this style of football leaves you very little margin of error. Now, the last 3 games, we can throw that out the window because they absolutely dominated the teams that they played and played really well. But I think, and maybe I'm wrong, but I think the point still stands is that, think about it, if for let's say Alabama and Georgia, right? Alabama could not run the ball, and they got to a point where they just abandoned the run. They didn't even try to run the ball. They were just going to throw the ball nonstop and again and again, and it ended up working for them because I look at the pass game. It's easier to hit a big 60-yard pass play than it is hit a 60-yard run play. So really, if you're able to execute when you're throwing the ball, you just have a better shot of getting those big plays and hitting, and having a play like Georgia did against Alabama, where they just completely blow the coverage. 4 guys are playing zone and 1 guy's playing man, or vice versa, and you get Jameson Williams running down the field by himself. Like, that it's that can happen still in the run game, but when you're talking explosive plays, that's why Lincoln Riley and those Oklahoma teams scored a lot of points. Well, although they were very effective in running the ball, they threw it a lot. So, it makes it difficult when you're not executing at a high level and the guys on the other side are just as athletic as you are, maybe more. So it's difficult, but I don't think that game was indicative of who both of these teams are. I do think it was for Georgia. They look like a team that was the number 1 team in the country. And for Michigan, that was a game that we had not seen from Michigan all season. And Georgia did go out and win the game, and so I want to echo the same thing you said, Dre, of it's not that I'm not giving Georgia credit. I absolutely am. But I don't think that was Michigan's A game or even B game. There's just a lot of mistakes, things that we haven't seen all season. And to be fair, I think if they both play their A games, I think Georgia probably still wins. But I think it's much closer than, the score finished by, 23 points. But I think that game, that was even closer than what it seemed.
It turns the layover. And here's my point, Desmond, when we were talking about that post game. Here's what I want people to answer for me, right? We all agree. All three of us agree. Both teams playing at their best, Georgia wins. But my question to you guys who didn't understand what my point was about the layover having an effect on Michigan more potentially was what that Michigan team we saw versus Georgia, was that the same Michigan team you saw against Iowa, against Ohio State? Don't think about the opponent. I'm talking about the characteristics of that team. I can't say 100% yes, right? Now, I'm not saying they drastically fell off, right? Because I personally, I've always believed that this Michigan team never played, but they never won games by destroying their opponent for the most part, right? By a huge scoring margin for the most part. Like, you just never felt like that because they never had an offense like that towards, at least most of the season. It was very vanilla, right? It was ground and pound, right? It don't make mistakes, right? And be stout defensively. And then they started to expand the playbook towards the end of the season. But other than that's pretty much who they've been. So it's like when they got here by being disciplined, by not having self-inflicted mistakes. So when they did that against Georgia, I'm like, hold on, that's not how this team got here, right? That's not the staple of this team. So that's what I meant by it must have been the layover potentially that led to this portion of the game, not the entirety of the game, but how Michigan is hurting themselves. So that's what I meant. That was disappointing. That wasn't the same Michigan team that, we start to get confidence in.
Yeah, I agree. I don't think that was the same team that we saw, play Iowa. And I think you said don't think about the opponent. So that was going to be my next comment. But I think we saw a comment that someone had put and Mark had highlighted, was talking about the Harbaugh rumors that seem to be kind of floating around now via Twitter. And I saw one, and had a response. I just, to me, and here's my stance on it, and then I'll kick it to you, Dre. I I don't want to call out the person, and actually, I don't remember who it was that posted it. Actually, I might,
Bruce
but
Feldman.
nonetheless, I think it was. But
Sorry, I was supposed to say that.
my essentially my comment was I read the article, so I didn't just read the headline and make a comment. I read the article, and it basically said that there's a source that says he might be interested in going to the NFL, and a source had also supposedly from Michigan that he could have interest in the NFL. And the thing that I don't like about it is you are essentially saying nothing, because if you say he could have interest in it, then what you're also saying is he could also not have interest in it. And I had I'm like, we're truly in the era of clickbait, because Jim Harbaugh gets clicks. Like, he is he's probably top 3 when it comes to just kind of media attention. Like, he gets the clicks. Michigan, obviously, we know what that brand stands for, the Block M, and it annoyed me. And maybe I'm totally wrong, and maybe he goes to Vegas and coaches Derek Carr and the Raiders. But to me, it just I was a little frustrated by it, just because it didn't seem to be any real substance to it. Because if he ends up staying, what negative ramification is there for whatever reporter wrote the story? Nothing. It's nothing at all. It's just, I got traffic to our website or whatever, my Twitter account, or whatever the case may be. And it's just, you're not having to reveal any sources, which that's a separate thing. I understand that with journalism, but I just didn't love it. And I thought it was an article essentially about nothing. So that was my take on it, to be quite frank. But that's it. So, Dre, what say you about it?
It's just this what comments. This is typical for this time of the season. This time of the season. Harbaugh is always rumored to NFL. At one point, it was the coach job to team up with Andrew Luck again before he retired. Right? Then he got the Chicago Bears. Even before Matt Nagy, he got hired the first time. Then Matt Nagy, it's just like this is typical. I'm not going to say that he doesn't have any legitimate interest in his heart or mind to one day return to NFL, because I think, quite frankly, based on how things ended in San Francisco, getting so close to winning a championship, I think that's, every coach is an egomaniac on some level. Like, I do think especially losing to his brother, I do think that he's like, man, I would love to get that Super Bowl. However, from a total package standpoint, he's never going to have a better job than what he has now. For the most part, he is above reproach, right? He's, for the most part, forget what the fan base thinks, right? Because before this season, a lot of fan base soured on him. But internally, he was never really going to get fired, right? Like, that was never going to happen. He has way too much respect from the university, from the boosters, right? It's just, that was never going to happen. And so, look, he's comfortable here. I believe his family is comfortable here. He just had a really good season. And he knows that he doesn't typically last anywhere else very long, because he burns bridges, and he's just not for everyone long term. This is the one place that he can last a decent amount of time. So it's like, I don't know. It would have to be a can't miss opportunity, and I just don't think the Las Vegas Raiders are that kind of opportunity. I don't think they are Jim Harbaugh away from being a Super Bowl contender. I think they're a good team, right? I think it'll have to be like a match made in heaven for him to leave.
Well, I would say, sorry, Mark, before you go, I would say there's not going to be a can't miss opportunity, because if there was, the head coach wouldn't be getting fired.
Right.
So there almost isn't one, right? Like, even Chicago, you could say, yeah, Justin Fields, a really good young quarterback, and I think most people think he's going to be at least pretty good. But then you got Allen Robinson, who knows what's happening there. So you're talking about your number one receiver may not want to be there anymore. Khalil Mack isn't playing the way that he did when he first got
He'll
there.
probably get traded, dude. That's not. He's
I
not.
mean,
Like,
you know what I mean? Like the perfect opportunity, like that San Francisco opportunity was extremely rare. It
yes.
just Mike Singletary, as much as I like him as a player and even as a coach, he just didn't do a great job there. And that was a
Right.
very talented roster. And Jim Harbaugh took that and ran with it and did a great job. But I mean, that doesn't happen. Like outside of Sean McVay getting fired today, there's just not or Andy Reid, there's not a ideal spot where you're like, oh my God, this is a perfect opportunity. I mean, Jacksonville, that's not a perfect
Oh,
opportunity, right? Like, but the jobs that are open, yeah, there's some that are better than others, but I wouldn't say there's any home run where you're running to get down there.
and to be honest with you, like you know what, and I'll say this too, and this I might catch some. Actually, I probably will catch flack for saying this. Okay, guys, please listen to me. Okay, I think Jim Harbaugh is a good coach, right? I don't believe he's a great coach. If he did leave, I wouldn't be crying and in a panic, right? Everything is over and stuff like that. So, Desmond, Mark, if you ever ask me, hey, if Jim Harbaugh leaves, would you be devastated? The answer is no. I wouldn't be devastated. Do I want him to leave necessarily at this point? No. I mean, it's hard. How can I say that after this past season? I would be lying. But if he left, I'm like, all right. Like it's at this point he'll never have the cachet, even for the league NFL perspective. Like he'll never have the cachet he had when he first arrived in Michigan, right? When he first arrived in Michigan in 2014 or early 15, he was a top 3 coach in the game. You can't miss. Besides, unless you had Nick Saban or Urban Meyer, you would have loved to have Jim Harbaugh. Everywhere else in the country, everywhere else. Right? Even after this past season, he's not back to that level. And he'll have to go on some historical run to get back to that kind of cachet. Right? So, look, whatever.
Well, I was going to ask you, Dre, when you said he's a good coach, not a great coach, and I'm not going to argue with that. I think that's fair. But define good and great. So out of the coaches in college football, who would you rank above him? And, everybody else is obviously below him. Where do you think he ranks? Is he a top 5 coach, 10 coach?
I'll say he's at the very least top 15. Top 15. I'll put him somewhere between 10 and 15.
Okay.
Somewhere 10 and 15. And I'm trying to not, and to be honest with you, I'm trying to not get too emotionally swayed by this season. I'm trying to weigh the entirety of the 7 years he's been here, right? Because it's so easy to do that as fans. Like, how can you dare say that? We just beat Ohio State, won the Big Ten in the playoff. Jimmy, calm down. I'm just trying to, I'm thinking about.
So how about this? I've got 2 head coaches in mind, and I would like to know whether you rank Jim Harbaugh higher or lower than that coach.
Okay.
First, let's go Mel Tucker. Do you put Jim Harbaugh over him or under him?
You little, I can't say on the stream. Oh my God! Why would
That's
you do
a
that?
pretty simple question.
No, I can't. I, out of fairness, I can't put Mel Tucker above Jimmy. He has to prove a lot more. But I do think he's legitimate. State fan. I mean, not state fans. Some Michigan fans want to dismiss him. I think he's a legit coach.
Okay. What about Lincoln Riley? That's my second one.
Oh no, Lincoln's higher than Harbaugh. I'm sorry.
Okay. Based on what?
I just think he runs a better program. Way more exciting program. He's been to the playoffs twice? I want to say definitely once. Been there twice. He's had multiple Heisman Trophy winners. Yeah,
3 times. I'm sorry, because he went with Baker, Kyler, and Jalen. If I'm not mistaken.
So, yeah. No, he didn't go with Jalen. But
yeah, wasn't that when LSU hung like 50 on him in the
17 with Baker against Georgia, 18 with
Kyler against Bama,
and then 19 against LSU with Jalen Hurts.
Yeah, and they got like 50 hung on him in the first 47 or something in the first half.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, that's all I wanted to see where you put.
D Brown didn't like me, like what I put Harbaugh. Look, man, like fine, like no, he's not in my top 5 of coaches in the game. Okay, D Brown, like because I'm trying not to get emotional. I'll be honest with you, I'm not a big fan of his. Like I just don't. I don't have anything personal against Harbaugh. He's just a weird guy to me. Like he's a weird guy. I don't understand his any press conference he gives. I don't like. I just don't. He's just not for me. It's not personal, right?
One thing I will give him credit for was this year was very different. A lot of the goofiness that he has had in the past, I think he is moved past that. So, well, this year he moved past that, and I mean, I'll give him credit for that because I do agree with you before, Dre. I'm like, man, this is just kind of for a coach who coaches at a very high level. His demeanor, especially at press conferences, was different than the other coaches. And I'll put it that way. Not that his is right or wrong, but it's just different than other guys in the
Amazon show. What was it? What was
it called? A long time ago.
That was 2017.
No, because
that was a 17 season. Because it was right. After Wilton Spate. It was just don't do that. It was 4 years ago, and he's in front of the team talking about wanting ice cream as a kid. Like I don't, I just don't understand the guy. And I just personally, I think he's a good coach. Okay, D Brown, everyone, I think he's a good coach. Maybe really good. Fine. I don't want to split hairs. Okay, he's a good coach. Most programs around the country will want to have him. Okay, most. All right. I'm just saying, I wish I had Lincoln Riley over Jim Harbaugh. I just want someone more like that, someone younger, more excitement. I just like that kind of stuff, right? Like I just don't like Jimmy's persona. I don't.
So you wouldn't take Nick Saban?
Oh, of course I'll take Nick Saban, but Nick Saban wins. So he's not younger, but he has more. That's an anomaly in terms of cachet that I just couldn't turn down. Okay. Yeah, I may be accepting the old man to run my team, but he's going to get all the right assistance and do whatever he needs to do to win. So there are exceptions. But I just want someone younger, fresh, like Mel Tucker was. I think he's probably in his late 40s, early 50s. But I just love the energy he injects in this program. Jimmy is just always kind of I don't know, man. It's just I don't.
You're hard on the guy, man. Listen, okay,
I give him credit.
His previous time. But come on, man. He beat Ohio State, won the Big Ten, made it to the playoffs.
First time in 7 years, Desmond. I mean, here's my thing.
That's still difficult to do.
Fans, we have to.
That is difficult to do.
Mel Tucker. 0-2 versus. See, don't do this. See now, I don't like how this is going. This is about to make it seem like. This is about to make it seem like I'm against Jim Harbaugh and I'm trying to demean everything he's done this season. I'm not doing that. I'm just saying, in terms of the prospect of him leaving. Am I scared and shaking in my boots? Either way, not really. That's just me. But he's a good coach. He is. But
do you think he's going to leave? If you had to call it right now, and I'm talking this offseason, do you think if you had to make a call, fork to your nose, is he making a move this offseason?
Nah, man. I think he's too comfortable. I just don't see it.
I don't think he's way too comfortable. Mark, what do you think?
I think he's staying.
It just would be tough to do the work that he's done, get to this point, you finally break through, because sometimes things are impossible until you do them, right? So for the longest,
great slogan, Desmond.
Well, it's not mine, but nonetheless, right? As you played Ohio State, the first year it was really close, and JT was short, and all this stuff. But then it started to the margins got wider, and it looked like you were getting further from it, right? The last clip we had of in the 2019 game was a reporter asking him if he thinks that the talent gap is getting bigger or something like that, and he just responded with, "I'm not going to sit here and take your insults," right? And that was the last game that happened between Ohio State and Michigan until this year. So you go through all of that, you finally break through, you win it. All to go to the NFL to another job, and the craziest part, let's say, sake of discussion, that happens. Jim Harbaugh leaves. Let's say Josh Gaddis gets promoted to head coach, or Mike McDonald, take your pick.
I would like that.
And say whoever the head coach is, say Michigan next year wins the national championship. How crazy is Jim Harbaugh going to drive himself after leaving, regardless of what happens in the
Actually, his legacy
NFL? He
grows.
would. Oh man,
I think his legacy grows. I'll tell you why. I think his legacy grows. It's kind of like that.
You think so?
I think it'll be more like the way it'll be seen historically. It'll be very similar to how Butch Davis is viewed. His tenure is viewed at Miami. Like no one really gives what's his name, Coker, his last name. Like no one really gives him
a lot of credit. People,
I don't know.
Now maybe Butch Davis's players.
Most of the Miami players said that he didn't do anything, that they policed themselves. They said this on a 30 for 30. Okay, that was Butch Davis' team.
Boys.
All right, Mark. But think about this too, though. You need a special kind of coach to understand that too. So what if you had
let me get out the way,
right? Goodness, like a kind of military style coach to where they come in and they're getting all crazy and not letting those guys police themselves, like running the issues. So that's interesting. So we covered the Harbaugh stuff. So question for you. Number one, we see the transfer portal is blowing up. Even Michigan had a couple guys, some younger defenders.
Got about 10 more minutes, by the way. Hit.
Cool.
10 more minutes. Okay.
So yeah, perfect. 2 topics. So transfer portal is going crazy. The big personality or player that's in it right now is Caleb Williams. And from the talks of it, you hear, and granted, this is rumor and speculation, but you hear people are talking about him potentially going to the highest NIL bidder. Do you think that Michigan should do more in the NIL world as far as, and I'm not saying, a bidding war or anything like that on a player, but just doing a better job of setting their players up for potential NIL, opportunities?
100%. Anything that your university and your program can do to appeal to higher caliber players, you should do, as long as it's within the rules of the game, right? For years, Michigan has prided themselves on being a clean program. Well, guess what? Now you can add some incentive for these players to come play for you in a way that is clean. So 100% they need to be doing that. Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely, but let's be honest. Caleb Williams is going to USC. That's just what I think, and it is what it is. And I said that from the moment that Lincoln Riley said he was going to USC. And he said, "Well, yeah, I'm not going nowhere. Hook 'em." No, I'm sorry. That's
Boomer. That's their thing. Boomer.
What would the Sooners say?
Yep. No, I agree. I think it's just a new landscape of college football. You can't, and it's kind of odd to say, but you can't just sit in the past and think that you can do things that you've always done and going to get the same results when the landscape has changed. I look at it in a similar way to spread offense and tempo. When Johnny Manziel and Texas A&M beat Nick Saban and Alabama, we really started to see it, because I think that was 2012, but we really started to see that spread offense, that tempo really make huge waves in college football. And the teams that made the transition to embrace that, you see, had success and were able to win games and still win at a high level. Whereas some of the teams that stayed in their realm of, oh, yeah, no, we're just going to do power football and run the ball. A team, unfortunately, that comes to mind is Iowa, where they are just not going to, they're just not going to play football the way that everybody else does.
Man.
I said nothing about Corey. He's a sweet guy, sweet guy. But I think it's the same thing with NIL. You're not going to be able to just sit and do what you've always done and think that you're going to be successful. Like your guys are going to pass you up. I mean, you look at Quinn Ewers. I mean, he got $1 million deal when he went to Ohio State, and he didn't even play it down, and he's gone back home to Texas now. So
all that oil money.
Yeah, he's going to make a lot of it. Last thing, and maybe it's a topic that will hit some hot buttons, but hindsight's always 20/20. So when you look back at this season, do you think, is there any hindsight on the JJK decision? And what I mean by that is, do you think that Michigan would have been better off with JJ starting from day one versus Cade?
You need to add, for me to answer that question, get that question the proper fairness. I need you to add something to the end of that question.
I'll
And
do
it
no
needs to.
such thing.
Oh,
No, I'm just
okay.
playing. Go ahead.
You see, got people. The reason why this works is because this is really authentically how me and Desmond are. Like we
Yes.
were literally sitting cubicles at work and like right next to each other, and I'll be on Desmond's left. He'll just turn to me like, I was thinking, what's going on with Caleb Williams in the portal? Where you think he's going? It'll be like random 1:30, and he'll just like, where you think Caleb Williams is going? Like. Anyway, to answer your question, Des,
So what do you need me to put at the end of that to give it its just due?
I will end it with for Michigan to have gone further in the season or for the betterment of the future.
Okay.
Right. So I think for the betterment of the future, Michigan would have been better off starting JJ at the beginning of this season for the betterment of the future. For this year, I still thought to get to where they got, even to still get past Georgia this past New Year's Eve, Cade was the right choice at this point, right? More seasoned, better decision maker, a little bit more polished. But so that's how I answer that. And I think you're gonna and luckily Michigan has a very, very soft schedule to start next season. So JJ will have, or whoever starts, kind of, it's not where we shouldn't. People say, don't just assume JJ is going to be on. Okay, fine. If JJ was to start, if he was to take over and start next season, he has enough ramp up time, right?
Mm-hmm.
But let's say that wasn't the case. That you could have been putting a kid, even though he may be more talented, in a non-favorable position where he has to play well from the get-go, and he's just not ready, right? In terms of being polished enough. So that's how I answer that. Long term, JJ should have started. Short term, it was right to go with Cade.
Yeah, I agree. And next season, here's your Michigan's first 3 games. It is a gauntlet. You kick off at home September 3rd with the Colorado State Rams. Week after that, you kick off at home against the Hawaii Rainbow Warriors.
Wow.
And the third game, which is really a doozy, you kick off at home against the Yukon Huskies. And if you want to throw the fourth game in there, you kick off September 24th at home against the Maryland Terrapins. So your first 4 games, you don't leave the state, you don't leave the big house,
Wait, I'm
and
sorry.
you play what we think will be some pretty bad teams.
Wait a minute. Well, wait a minute. I just think you said the first 3 games. I know they're all at home. We know Michigan. Easy joke, and this is true. We never leave home in September.
Correct.
Never leave home in September.
Don't go home
right?
without it.
Right. Matter of fact, like the bus getting to like the airport literally does not run like until October. Like they just chill. Right.
Mm-hmm.
The first Colorado State to Hawaii to Yukon, which is a albatross of a disaster right now, right?
Mm-hmm.
And like,
and then you get Maryland.
Yep. And then we get Maryland. Look, man.
But after that, you have the scary prospect of going to Iowa on October 1st, and I know that's a touchy thing.
Touchy. Of course, when we playing that one up, baby. In Michigan and their, I can't, how Michigan ran a score up on Iowa during a Big Ten title game.
I'm sure Iowa won't forget, so they're gonna do their best to beat you 21-10.
Oh yeah. Great. No, man, it should help with that very, 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 very vanilla season to start, next year. But and that will help. And that's just the main thing, man. Like if you're gonna go with JJ, and just make sure that you use that time. The main thing that I guess that we can agree on is if you go with JJ, do not waste those first 3 games. I would say 4 weeks. Don't waste them. Especially if you got to go at Iowa, a very respectable place to play at. I would assume a night game, whatever it is. We can just agree to disagree. Don't waste that time. Don't be, ground and pound. Let JJ be JJ.
But are we gonna end up with the same cycle that we had this season, where
That's my
week after
fear,
week after week, our first 3 weeks, 4 weeks, we're like, what are we doing? What are we doing? We're just running
bro.
the ball. We're just running the ball.
Bro, we're gonna after the Hawaii game, we're gonna have Michigan's gonna win 65-3, and we're talking a stat line of Michigan 400 rushing yards, 125 passing yards. And it's like, what are we doing? Hawaii has a trash pass defense. Why are we not? This is what JJ is great at. Let him rip it. I'm gonna lose my mind. I will lose my mind if we just waste, especially if JJ starting. If it's KM indifferent. But if it's JJ, like I swear, if we waste those first 3 weeks against, like we're gonna hear, oh, guess what? There's we don't have to hear. Oh, well, Washington has some of the best corners in the
NFL
country.
corners. Yeah.
Like no, we don't gotta hear none of that. You know what I'm saying? Like no, please, just do what you gotta do.
Yeah. We'll see what happens, but I'm not gonna hold my breath. I'd pass out. So, had we done that this year, same thing would have happened. We'd have passed out. So that's is what it is. But yeah,
you guys shut up. Just enjoy the season and enjoy the win. It's like, okay, thank you very much. You guys are never satisfied. What do you want us to do? Throw for 300 yards? No.
Absolutely no. That's actually, yes, that is what I want them to do. Throw for 300 yards. Yes, I would like that. Well, because I think next year, and we could wrap, but next year, I think we can all agree that the defense is going to take some type of step backwards with losing Aiden, losing Ojabo. I think Ross might be gone as well. You're losing multiple guys, high-level guys on that defense. I would think to balance that out, you would lean a little more on that offense where, your quarterback is a little more dynamic. Ronnie Bell's coming back. You got Andrell Anthony. I think Cornelius Johnson, not sure about what that situation is there, but Donovan Edwards. Like you've got some talent on offense, and I would think that's the way that the 2022 Michigan Wolverines would look. But that's just me looking at things on paper and not being at practice at all. So I don't know.
No, I mean, I think that the offense has a chance to be absolutely the strength of this team next year, especially if JJ is who we think he can be, right? I think one thing that's very evident, I know we're trying to wrap, but is that the kid has all the tools, but I thought Kurt Hershey made a good point. It's not just about the tools, but can he also have the composure as well, right? Can he have the moxie that the really good quarterbacks need? And if he can, then I'll put it this way: there are weapons, including Donovan Edwards, on this Michigan team going into next year that we could see a potentially historic type of offensive output. I think they're that balanced, like in terms of overall weapons. So there's a chance this thing could really pop next year. Absolutely.
Yeah, I think, and we'll see what the offense looks like, but early on, I would put Ronnie Bell as a dark horse, potentially breaking some Michigan receiving records. We'll see, but like I said, I think in at least 3 or 4 games next year, you're gonna have to score some points, like to win the game, like not like Iowa where it's just like, we're better, so we're dominating. But I think you're gonna need some 42 to 40s or 32. Yeah, I think you're going to need some games like that.
I think Donovan Edwards. Now this is a hot take. I think Donovan Edwards, before he leaves the University of Michigan, has the potential. I've seen enough about this with this kid in both the running game and the receiving game that he can have a why am I drawing a name blank?
McCaffrey.
McCaffrey type Christian McCaffrey type output for at least one season at Michigan. Like he's dangerous, equally dangerous running the ball and receiving. I mean, I haven't seen a Michigan. I don't know if you can recall, Desmond, a Michigan running back in recent history that can line up at receiver and can beat corners. And like he's literally they can place him anywhere. And he's equally dangerous. So no, man, I think this can be special.
Agreed. All right, well, good people. We've got, I think, 60 or so on the line right now. So thank you guys so much for tuning in. Thanks for hanging out till the end. We definitely appreciate it. And that is it for us.
Peace.
See ya.